So here's a picture of me on the day that my mom died. So I say that I was 9. I was actually 8, but I was about to turn 9. And it at that time I remember being very sophisticated and very smart and mature. And when I look at this picture, I go, it's hard to look back and say you would change something, because obviously the person that I am right now is because of the journey that brought me here. But my mom knew that without her, my life might not be so good. And I feel like, although you think that you're not going to die at 35 years old, if she had done more concrete planning for what she would want for me, I feel like some of the difficulties that I had wouldn't be there. I'm regularly telling my friends who have children, have an estate plan in place, because even if you think you don't need it, no one thinks that they're going to die at 35 years old. Have it in place. Have the plans, what you want for your children, have it in place. My parents got divorced when I was 4 years old. My mom passed away. My mom had the majority of custody. So my dad had alternate weekends, but it was mostly my mother that was raising me. The transition after my mom passed away to living with my dad was very different. My mom was a very active parent. She was very active in my upbringing. And my father, who was married to he wasn't married yet to my stepmother, but he was with my stepmother, living together. They had a very, They had a very reactive way of raising me. When my mom passed away, my dad was not ready to be raising a child, a small child, and a child that was dealing with grief. My mom knew that my dad wasn't very responsible, organized, things like this. And I do wish that I think it would have made a big difference if she had her expectations and her wishes more concrete, where it could protect me and it could give me boundaries and structure, because my father wasn't giving that to me. I do wish that my mom would have planned more. In a way she did, but she didn't put it in writing. One of the things that she said, I had an uncle and an aunt who were very well established, and she told them that if anything happened to her, she wanted them to raise me. And I think when the time came, I'm not angry with them or anything like that, but I think when the time came, they didn't want to traumatize me more. At that time, my father was my hero, because he kind of spoiled me. And I think they didn't want to harm my dad. They didn't want to harm me. But I feel like if it had been in writing, it would be like, look, this is what she wants. And I would have gotten so much more attention to my development, because my father, he was not, and this is why I think she chose, instead of having my father raise me, she said she wanted my uncle to raise me, because my father was a really good person, but he was overly sensitive. His mental health was not good. I ended up being his caretaker instead of him being my caretaker. And I think she knew that. And so she wanted my uncle to raise me, but again, they didn't want to harm him. They didn't want to harm me. Their intentions were good. But if this were in writing, I feel like it would have happened. I would have been raised by my uncle, who would have been a more stable place for me to be. So my father had always been very sensitive. My mother and father got divorced because I'm told, I heard it secondhand, but he wasn't pulling his weight in the family. It was kind of like she was raising him and me. And so after my mother died, I moved in with my father and my stepmother. And again, they were doing what is legally required. But it was a big difference. I could really feel the difference. And you're gonna have a hard time as a child anyway, because it's a transition, but they just were not as actively involved. And I think that my stepmother, who was having a relationship with this fun man, once the responsibility of raising a child went on top of that, and my father's depression got very out of control, she ended up leaving when I was 12. And my father, who didn't have good mental health, didn't have good coping skills, he started drinking. It started out as a tequila sunrise every night, and then it became tequila and orange juice, and then it became glasses of tequila, and then he just started drinking out of the bottle. And he basically he would go to work, and I do feel blessed. I feel blessed because my father fed me. He kept me fed. He kept me sheltered. But he would go to work, and then he would come home, and he would be asleep. So basically, my father was asleep a lot of my childhood after my stepmother left. And I spent my time, in a way I was raising myself, but I was also very worried about him. I felt on a regular basis more concerned about him than concerned about myself, about my grades, I wanted all these things. I wanted to be something, but having your only parent comatose is my attention. It was just very difficult for me to focus on grades and focus on. I tried, and I in the end I did okay, but holidays were different. The biggest difference was after my stepmother left my father, but I could tell that it was different. When I'm thinking about it right now, Josh, a big part of the transition, first my mom died when I was 9, and then my stepmom left when I was 12. So then another big shift happened after I was 12. So when my stepmother was still there, the holiday situation, they would make a turkey. We would see her. They did a good job of keeping me in touch with, especially my grandmother on my father's side. They did a good job of keeping me in touch with my family on my mother's side. But after my stepmother left my father, I have a great story. One holiday, one Christmas, I think I was 13 years old. My father and I were both drunk to decorate the Christmas tree. 13 years old. There was we put blue Christmas decorations on the tree, and then I was like, hey Dad, should we just leave it like this? And he was like, okay. And Christmas, when you decorate a Christmas tree, you're putting all these different memories, all these decorations from years ago, and I think probably I could just feel that this is going through the motions, this is stupid. I mean, the fact that we put up a tree, that I don't remember if it happened again after that. I just think it's really funny, a 13-year-old and her father both drunk putting up a Christmas tree. Terrible. On my 18th birthday, I got about $100,000. which us adults know is not, it's a great blessing, but it's not a lot of money. But to an 18-year-old child, especially an 18-year-old child who's living working class, lower middle class, $100,000 just seems like so much money. So to me, I was rich, and if I wanted something, I could have it. And I thought that I was being responsible. And if you think about it, I spent it in about 4 years, which comes down to about $25,000 a year. So I was not spending it very fast, but that money could have been used so much better. It could have benefited me so much more, but I just wasn't ready. I was too young. I was too young to understand what money is and how much it is. One of the things about losing a parent, experiencing trauma, experiencing suffering, is I am very sensitive to the suffering of other people. And I'm a good person. And the thing about that is con artists know how to target people with big hearts. And when I'm just stumbling over my words. One thing that happened, I feel very stupid about it. I was online, and somebody who was in a Facebook group, so it felt very intimate, she posted a GoFundMe for some basketball players. They were going to a tournament, and the sponsor pulled out, and they were foster children. So being that they were foster children just tugged at my heartstrings, because I know how it feels to have adults let you down. And my good nature, I felt, I believed it was true, and I ended up loaning $2,545 to a stranger on the internet to be paid back, and it hasn't all been paid back. It wasn't until I was much older that I really learned how to I'm not going to say save money, but not spend it as much. And when I was younger, my depression was much worse, and anxiety was much worse. My mental health was not as well managed. And so I would often spend money to solve my problems. Like, instead of being more proactive, I would be reactive. I would also shop for emotional comfort. So I would buy, I would buy clothes, but it's stupid because I would buy clothes, but they would be on clearance. So I felt like I was being responsible financially, but I really wasn't, because I was buying clothes I didn't need. Maybe they didn't fit me well. So it took me years to become more financially responsible. Part of what had to happen is I had to run out of money. I would say it was my early to late 30s that I finally started to feel confident in my ability to manage my finances. I still feel imperfect, but I do feel more confident in that I can trust myself in using money well. Even though I did my best at trying to spend it well, I was a kid. I was a kid who was traumatized. I wasn't ready for that responsibility. And I feel like if there had been someone who was money related, who's professional, there to guide me and to kind of create a structure and some rules, I really would have benefited from that. So when my mom passed away. I was 9 years old. And I've always been an anxious person, but I really remember identifying depression in myself at age 9. I remember sitting in my bedroom and listening to music and thinking, life just doesn't feel the same as it used to. Things don't excite me the way they used to. And I feel very, very blessed because my mother worked in, she had a degree, a bachelor's degree in psychology. So my mother's influence on me saw therapists as a positive thing as opposed to like a stigma. So additionally, in a positive way, my father did seek help when I was 12. My father did seek help and got diagnosed with depression and started taking medication. I think that's when my stepmother left him. She thought, oh, he's getting help now. Now it's okay to leave this little girl. But instead of just continuing, he started self-medicating with alcohol. But the stigma of mental health was not in me. So one of the things that I think is like the number one thing, that the reason I'm surviving right now and didn't end up myself an alcoholic or myself killing myself, is that I started seeking mental health treatment young. Losing my mom, it's such a part of who I am as a person. I think it took, in 2002, I was suicidal. So I turned 18 in 1998, I believe. And 2002, I finally got to the point where suicide just seemed like the best option. And I didn't want to, but I just felt like I had run out of options. And by that time, I was a full adult. But the thing about the loss and about not having guidance and not having someone look after you, you end up raising yourself. And I think in the long run, I've done an okay job, but I went through so much trauma and so much difficulty. And even to this day, I'm 41 years old, and people around me don't really realize that I came from a really screwed up situation, which is good, but I still have to carry around my depression and anxiety. And I get very defensive and very upset because what other people can do naturally takes me 3 times as much work. And so I get very defensive when people expect more of me when I really don't have it in me. So at 41 years old, I'm still carrying around things from the loss.